This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this edition of A Different Perspective. I am, in fact, Kevin Randle. Don't let the beard fool you. I'm going to be joined in a few minutes with Michael SCHRATT. Well, I'll just read the introduction here. We'll go on from there. Michael SCHRATT is a private pilot and aviation historian who's been investigating UFO encounters for over 25 years. Between 2008 and 2009, Michael meticulously reviewed a minimum of 50,000 cases which were preserved at the Center for UFO Study archives in Chicago. He has recreated dozens of highly incredible UFO cases using drawings, illustrations, and commissioned artwork. And I have to tell you, the artwork is incredible. I've seen some of it. When I interviewed him once before on this program, we had some of the illustrations up there, and they are fantastic. He has also investigated the Kingman UFO crash, which has returned to widespread scrutiny thanks to Christopher Mellon's recent release of an email chain suggesting the crash was real. And this is kind of how I got back in touch with him as we were investigating. And I say we, David Rudiak and I were looking into the Kingman case, and his name surfaced in relation to that. So we'll chat about that too. He has appeared on multiple media platforms, including the following: Coast to Coast AM, History Channel, Paranormal Matrix, UFO Hunters, Fade to Black, and of course, A Different Perspective. In addition, Michael has been guest speaker at multiple UFO conferences, including the following: Phoenix MUFON, Orange County MUFON, International UFO Congress, MUFON Symposiums, and the UFO Con. Michael, welcome to A Different Perspective.
Hello, Kevin. Good to be with you.
Well, maybe we'll get this straightened out here, what we're really going to talk about.
We'll see.
What got us started, or what got me started and brought your name up was David Rudiak and I were chasing the Christopher Mellon email chain that he published with the suggestion of the Kingman crash. And in our investigation, your name came up, as did Preston Dennett's name and a couple of other people who were related to the Kingman crash. I understand you're also very interested in Leonard Stringfield's work.
Absolutely.
On crash retrievals and the witnesses that he interviewed. And I'm sure you've got all his status reports.
Absolutely.
And copy of his paper from 1978, in which he kind of brought UFO crash retrievals into mainstream ufology after literally decades of people ignoring stories of UFO crashes because of the controversy of the Aztec UFO crash, which we will not be talking about. Mm-hmm. So you have done some research in the Kingman crash.
Correct. I've done some research in the Kingman crash. I was friends with
Michael. Your microphone is muted.
How about now? Okay, so
okay, you're good.
I was friends with Harry Drew. He was the principal investigator. Now, according to Harry Drew, this was not a crash retrieval. This was a soft landing. So we have to make that distinction. He claims that there was an experimental high-power radar system that was set up. And when this UFO flew through this radar, it was so intense that birds that flew through it fell to the ground immediately. And so this craft came down. I've got a couple of, not sure how well this will be seen here, but so this is March.
Please don't hold anything up to the camera because it does not work very well.
That's fine. May 18th, 1953. He said that there were 3 ET human-like figures standing next to the craft. There was another figure that was about another 50 feet in front of them. He was the quote-unquote leader, and the agreement was that we will go with you on one condition and one condition only, that you do not separate us. That was the agreement between the ETs and the U.S. military. From there, according to Harry Drew, this craft was put on a 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy, an M25 Dragon wagon. There was a cradle device. There was still some residual propulsion going on within the craft. Military personnel who entered the craft got sick immediately. They threw up. This happened twice. This is all according to Harry Drew. And then he said that they made their way going to Area 51. Now, this is a point of contention because U-2 spy plane flights didn't even start until 1955. I've got it confirmed by Peter Merlin, who wrote the best book on Area 51 that anyone has done on this planet. And he states that there was nothing there back in 1953. There was no hangar complex. There was an unimproved dirt runway at the remote test site back at that time in 1953. There were no hangars there. Now, what Harry claims is that they were trying to go across the Colorado River and they couldn't make it. So they took the entire Dragon wagon to a put-in about 200 feet north of the north wall of the Hoover Dam. They floated a barge down the Colorado River, brought the tank transporter with the disc shape on it onto the barge, floated it across the Colorado River, and made it to Area 51. In a nutshell, that's the Kingman retrieval, according to Harry Drew.
There's also discussion that there were two other landings and crashes in that area at the same time.
In May, there were multiple things going on. Harry Drew wrote a very nicely illustrated book on this. This is almost impossible to get a hold of, but he describes multiple events going on very near the May 18th landing.
Well, we have to point out Harry Drew passed away a number of years ago.
He passed away a couple of years ago. Yes, correct.
The other person that's been directly involved with this in detail, I think, is Preston Dennett, who has done some work on that and talked about multiple crashes in Arizona. And I think he talks about some of the same thing. I know David Rudiak also came across the information about these three crashes around May of 1953 in northern Arizona. Are you familiar with all three of those?
I am familiar with two other cases within the Stringfield collection.
And in the same time frame in northern Arizona.
In Arizona. We don't have an exact location, but we know that it is west of Globe, Arizona, back in 1947. This was talked about by Bill Hamilton. It's written in Leonard's book. I can give you the exact page number. It's page number 93. And he states that there was a Army personnel with one other on a unimproved dirt road. They were on a Jeep. They were stopped by MPs that had rifles. They were challenged. And then off to the left, they saw about a 30-foot diameter disc-shaped craft tipped up at a 40-degree angle. It had a dome on top. There was a series of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself, and then two rings wrapped around the outer circumference. So we did a detailed drawing of that craft and a full-color rendering as well. So that's two cases within Arizona.
Are you familiar with Arthur Stansel?
Yes, I am.
What do you think about his discussion of the case?
Difficult to say. I do have his obituary. I kind of did a little bit of a deep dive on him, drilling down into his background. He talks about him being Operation Knot Hole. He was involved in the atomic explosion experiments. He was certainly involved in that. Also, what Harry Drew stated is that when a team of 40 engineers and specialists got on a bus in Phoenix, they drove all the way up to the landing site. It was still dark when they got there. And according to Harry Drew, each person got out according to their expertise. So if you were someone that knew about landing traces, you would go here. If you were an atomic bomb expert, you would go over here. This is how Harry Drew laid out this case.
Now, we have to point out Arthur Stansel has an incredible background. I mean, he was an engineer. He did work at Indian Springs Air Force Base, which is in Nevada. And his story is he came from Indian Springs.
That's correct.
To Phoenix.
And they flew to Phoenix. They picked up another 15, and then they went northbound.
They went, and according to him, the bus windows were blacked out.
That's correct.
They weren't supposed to talk to one another. And you said they were brought off the bus based on their expertise.
That's what Harry Drew said, yes.
But there was also a point where Stansel suggested as they went back into the bus, their names were called off, giving the names to everybody who was on the bus.
I'm not familiar with that part of it, but I also know that he said that they were sworn to secrecy and they were told that this was a top secret military aircraft that they would be looking at.
I had a question. Do you have Ray Fowler's file on?
Yes, I do. I have it right with me right here.
The entire file?
The entire file.
You including the story about the contacts?
Whatever I was given from Harry Drew and everything I pulled up from QFOS, that's what I have.
Are you familiar that Stansel talked about extensive contacts, astral projection?
I guess I'm not familiar with that part of the account.
Well, I asked this question, and I don't blame you for this, but I asked this question because going back through my file, I've got the complete file that Ray Fowler put together, and you've got an extensive interview by the two teenage boys who first talked to Stansel about this, and then Ray Fowler has a transcript of that in there, and the second part of the transcript is called Contacts of the Man with the Contacts or something like that. And I see no reference to it except what I eventually found and put up on my blog, where Stansel is talking about how he and a group of people in New Jersey, paranormal people, that's not really for paranormal, researchers, people with an interest in the paranormal, got together on Sunday evenings and discussed this sort of thing. And they got into astral projection. And Stansel was talking about how he had projected himself onto a alien spacecraft that had been traveling for 1,000 years, and it was sort of a prison spacecraft, and he interacted with the aliens. You're unfamiliar with that part of the story?
I'm not familiar with that. No.
So you have Ray Fowler's file, but you do not have that information.
I guess I don't have that information. No.
Which is important because it suggests that Harry Drew edited the file.
I don't think Harry Drew would do that. That's not his kind of thing. He wasn't that kind of person. He was a legitimate librarian archivist, and they trusted him so much that they sent the original microfilm reel to Harry Drew, and he took a photograph of that, and it's in the book.
Unfortunately, like I said, it's a very rare book, and I haven't been able to find a copy of it. It's 7 Days in May or something like that.
That's
correct. Not to be confused with the movie, which was a plot to overthrow the presidency in the 1960s, called 7 Days in May, starring Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas, for those of you keeping score at home. But I'm interested in that file that you have. You have the Ray Fowler file. It's got an illustration of the craft in there. It's got the interview with that. It's got some information that Ray Fowler gathered as well. But it's also got can't think of the names. Jeff. Can't think of the names of the teenage boys who first interviewed him. We'll get back to that after this, because I got to take a commercial break, and I don't mean to throw you this curveball here. I'm just trying to pin down exactly how much information is available in these places, because I think that's an important thing to learn. As I say, I'm here with Michael SCHRATT. We've been doing UFO research forever. We'll talk about Len Stringfield. For those of you interested, take a look at my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and we will be back right after this. And we are back. Sorry about that, folks. I wasn't paying attention. I was looking for something on a book. I've got 2 iPads going here to do all of this stuff. Just to be clear on this, you have Ray Fowler's file. You have the interview that the boys conducted with it that Fowler included in the file. You have the illustrations.
I do not have the interview with Arthur Stansel. I've only seen what Harry Drew published in his book with the microfilm reel. And I've looked for that newspaper clipping, and that's very difficult to get. You got to get the original microfilm to get a copy of that.
I'll have to go look at the file. I think I may have a copy of that in the file that Ray Fowler put together. I can send that to you later on.
Sure.
provide you with that information. But there was nothing in what you have seen that suggested that Stansel had an interest in astral projection and was talking about.
Not that I know of. Now, again, I'm skeptical about this case because of a number of reasons. There was no Area 51 back in 1953. The U-2 didn't even get started till 1955. They didn't even start flying until at least 2 years later. So for them to be shipping the craft to quote unquote Area 51 in 53, there was nothing there. There wasn't even a hangar there. So that part of the story, I'm very skeptical about.
Well, that was with what, as you were talking there, I picked up on that as well, because Area 51 came up in other research, and when did that begin? And it suggested in 1953 they may have been talking about it and finding a location to place this secret base, but there was really nothing there until
there
much
was
later.
Nothing there. No. Mm-mm.
So I was going to talk about, and there must have been an easier way to get across the Colorado River than going down to Hoover Dam and floating a barge across it, but that's a whole other argument.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're skeptical of the Kingman crash yourself?
I am skeptical because that part of the story doesn't add up, and I can't explain it. It physically does not add up. Peter Merlin confirmed it. There's a picture of the remote test site back in 52 time frame, and there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There is an unimproved runway there. There's no hangars there. So where would you bring a craft without even concealing it, without even protecting it? If you're going to work on it, you're not going to bring it there. So that part of the story from Harry Drew never added up for me personally.
Well, if they in that time frame, if you're going to study that craft, the place you would have taken would have been Wright Field in Ohio.
That's simply quite a ways to go, but yes. Mm-hmm.
That's where the facilities were to back engineer and research this kind of thing. The Air Material Command was there to do that. And a lot of the Roswell material went there in 1947. So, but it's not the same kind of thing where you had a complete intact craft, I think is where I was going with that. So you're skeptical of the Kingman crash, but you think that Harry Drew might have not had the complete Fowler file. Then is what I'm getting.
I think it's possible Harry didn't have the entire story. The beginning part of the account seems to be accurate, but them shipping the craft to Area 51 when it didn't exist that time, that to me, we need to get some more research. We need more boots on the ground. Where did this craft actually go? That's where we need to find out.
Are you familiar with the name Judy Wilcott?
Judy Wilcott? Nope, I am not.
Well, there goes my next line of questioning. You've got yourself out of that one. Judy Wilcott was a woman, back when I was doing some of the research into UFO crashes, and Kingman was one that I was looking into, and I was always worried because it was single witness, Arthur Stansel. And Don Schmidt said, well, there's this woman, Judy Wilcott, who lived in the area at the time, and her husband had been involved in the retrieval operation. And then later on, he was sent to Vietnam, where he was killed. But before he died, he'd sent her a letter from Vietnam with the details of the crash in it.
Really?
And I thought, well, here's some interesting corroboration.
Okay.
But she could not produce the letter.
That's how it always is.
Then the other thing is, I interviewed the daughter, and she said, no, my father was not killed in Vietnam. He's very much alive. This was a number of years ago. He's still very much alive. And then Judy Wilcott's story kind of trailed away there. So I don't think of her as a witness to any kind of witness to the Kingman crash. So I kind of eliminated her. Dennett's book talks about her, misspells her name. He misspells Stansel's name for some reason. I haven't figured out
why. That happens a lot.
Yes. On my blog, I actually have a picture of his grave. So we know how it's spelled. Unless it's misspelled on the game. I'm going to backtrack just a moment. I'm kind of scattered here. You were talking about a case where people were turned back.
Correct.
Getting close to, I think
Correct.
That's called Secret Canyon UFO crash from August 4th of 1994.
No, this is 1947. Leonard Stringfield, page 893 in his book.
Which one?
This is the one that William Hamilton had related to Leonard. And
No. Which book? He's got a number of status reports.
It's the entire compendium here. This is the book right here. That book right there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. All of his status reports in one book. That's the book I'm talking about.
Oh, I have all the status reports separated with nice autographs from
Yeah.
Springfield.
So I have a question for you, Kevin. I have a question for you. I remember you told me years ago that back in 1991, Leonard maintained a collection of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence letters, drawings, contact info. Is that true?
I don't think it was. He had loose leaf binders
Okay.
with that material in it. He had a whole bunch of those, and when he passed, some of them went to MUFON, but some of them didn't. And what happened there was, right after he died, Stan Friedman called his widow and was trying to get that information, and it annoyed her. She withheld it from almost everybody at that time. Part of it has gone to MUFON. Part of it is being held by members of the family. So, but there's that kind of stuff, and he was very meticulous in keeping those records. So that record is out there, and it's something that I guess needs to be accessed because those are very valuable resources.
Of course they are.
Not all his cases are true.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yes.
Len Stringfield told me and Don Schmidt, I should say, that when we visited him at his home, that he felt his job was to collect these stories. He couldn't investigate them all, but he wanted to publish the basic information so maybe others would take over and follow up on those cases, which Don and I had done on a number of them, Kingman being one of them. And that was his point. He says, not all the stories were true. The Del Rio crash from originally 1948, Robert Willingham talked about that. Then it became December of 1950. And when I talked to Willingham, he wasn't sure whether it was 1954 or 1955. The details of Willingham's original story for Del Rio appear in the MUFON, well, it's not the MUFON Journal, it was Skylook magazine from March of 1968. It's on page 3 and it's one paragraph. And he's talking about how he was flying F-94s with the Air Force, and the DEW line picked up these craft crossing that, and that crashed just across the river from Del Rio, Texas, into Mexico. Problem was in 1948, when this allegedly took place, the F-94 was not operational and the DEW line didn't exist. And later on, the story evolved to cover all the mistakes until we got to the point where we learned that Willingham had not been a retired military colonel. He had been a low-ranking enlisted soldier who gets credit for serving in World War II, although he joined the Army in December of 1945. But the war was not declared over until the middle of 1946. So anybody who served in that period from the end of the shooting, the Japanese surrender in September of 45 through the middle of 1946 get credit for being a World War II veteran, which is probably more information than you care to have, and everybody else. The point was he was discharged as an E4. The Corporal Spec 4 is what it would have been, but he was never an officer. He was, in fact, in the Civil Air Patrol, which is an auxiliary of the Air Force. They do search and rescue. They have a cadet program. I myself was in it. It was why I recognized what he was doing there. But he was not an active officer, so his testimony kind of collapsed around that, and I think it takes the Del Rio case off the table, which... The point being is Len Stringfield had some of that information. He was very skeptical of it as well, based on the evolution of the story.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if you were familiar with the Del Rio crash retrieval or not.
Well, I'm familiar with the one that's just across the Texas-Mexican, right in the Rio Grande River. This is 1974. And then the other case that you talked about in 1955. So, there's two there. Plus there's one more that has a little less information.
I will say the one I'm talking about, which began in, I think, 1948, attached to Robert Willingham, is a hoax. We can eliminate that one make it a footnote in our research. I'm not that familiar. I know that in the MJ-12 document, they talk about a crash at the El India Guerrero area, which is basically the Mexican names for the area across the river from Del Rio. So I'm not sure how all that relates. I think it's really the Willingham story that's in the MJ-12 documents. Anyway, so you've been looking at the crashed retrievals that were in the book, or in Stringfield's book. Let me step back, because there's one thing I wanted to talk about, and you had mentioned some of the information coming from Wendell Stevens.
Yeah, this is what Harry Drew told me. He said that the reason why he was able to locate the site where the bus turned around, because Wendell said that it was located at a pyramidal rock structure. That's what he said. And then when Harry Drew spent months crisscrossing the desert, approximately where this thing came down, he found that pyramidal rock structure. And he said that he found canteen portions from the military personnel who were on the retrieval team. You know, how do we know it came from those people? We don't know for sure. But that was the marker that shows you essentially where the craft came down.
Are you familiar where that place is? Do you know where that is?
I don't know exactly where it is, because it's not easy to get there. That's for sure. But he's got a picture of it in the book. So
again, the book is very difficult to find.
Right.
So what do you think of Wendell Stevens as a witness?
You sure you want to go there?
Yes.
Part of it, I think he's reliable in many instances. When he talks about the B-29 missions over the Arctic regions, where dish-shaped craft came up from the icebergs and then trailed along the trailing edge of the main wing of the B-29, and then were just a forward of the leading edge of the horizontal stabilizer, locked into position with the B-29 with all the cameras rolling and all the motion picture film reel cameras rolling, and they got all this on film. And this happened multiple times. I believe those stories to be accurate. Plus, a lot of the other information that he got from all around the world, people sending him accounts and cases and photographs. A significant majority of those are hoax photographs. They're not legitimate. A lot of them are real, and that's my assessment of Wendell Stevens.
You aware of his legal troubles?
I'm aware of it. Yes, I'm aware of it.
Does that affect your perception of
Stevens? To a certain degree, yes, but I still think that a lot of his original research was good, because he just had people from all around the world sending him drawings of what they saw, sighting reports, photographs. He certainly at one time, and probably still has, the world's largest private collection of alleged UFO photos.
Interrupt you here. I just noticed I've got to take a break. We'll come back and talk about Wendell Stevens when we come back right after this. So everyone who's paying attention, please stick around. We'll be right back. I was paying attention this time, so I wasn't caught off guard. We are back. Michael SCHRATT. We're talking about Kingman. We're talking about Wendell Stevens. Looking at the credibility of Wendell Stevens, he claimed to be, and I say claimed to be because I have not seen the documentation, I'm trying to get it, was a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, had been a pilot, and that sort of thing. I am very leery of these self-reported claims, simply because in the world of the UFO, I have seen many, many people claiming military backgrounds, and when you check up on them, you find out it's not quite what they said. Robert Willingham being a prime example of that, for example. So I'm not sure if that information is accurate. It probably is. I just have not been able to get the response from the Record Center in St. Louis I wanted. I noticed that Drew had talked about a sheriff's deputy who was involved in this in some fashion. I'm sure you're familiar with that story.
I think you're talking about where two humanoid-looking beings were brought into a basement, kind of a jail facility, and then they disappeared without any trace whatsoever. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm just reading the note that David Rudiak sent me, and said that Drew also claimed to interview with the last surviving sheriff's deputy. So it'd be interesting to know what that guy had to say, you knew anything about that. David did find in his research that story of the two strange men being put into a cell, disappearing, and there was no way for them to get out. David and I went, I think there's newspaper articles that refer to that. David is chasing some of that stuff down.
Okay.
As well, but I'm not sure if that's the story. You know of any other story that he talked about with deputy being
just
involved? Mm-hmm. Well, I've got the question answered then. Mm-hmm. So you've wanted to talk about Len Springfield's work, and I think that's an interesting topic that we should explore because of the work he's done. What got you interested in his work in the beginning, and what do you think of it?
Well, I've always had an interest in aviation. That led me to some of the classified black budget programs within the military industrial complex. Living about an hour from QFOS back in 2003 timeframe, I spent probably 2 years going through all their files, every single one of their file cabinets with manila folders. I picked out each one. I'm talking about 50,000 cases here over a couple of year period. And looking through all the cases, looking for something that has a flight path, a 3-page report, and a sketch of what the witness saw. That kind of got me into the historical research. And then that led on to the crash retrieval cases from Leonard Stringfield. And the reason why I think it's important is because he was dealing with firsthand military witnesses that claim to have held the bodies, held the debris, manhandled craft up onto 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy trucks, and then shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And if somebody, some way, can get access to those original files, and I know Leonard didn't want the names released. However, it's been 50 years and beyond on a lot of these cases. A lot of these people are already long since gone. So in order to preserve their legacy, it'd be great to track down the remaining witnesses and have them testify as a united coalition in open congressional hearings.
Did the files you looked in, I've been through the QFOS files, not to the extent you have been. I was searching for specific things as opposed to an overview of everything. But the files you looked at, I know Alan Hynek got a lot of the information from the Air Force. And when you looked at the files that he had gotten from the Air Force, the names were not redacted as they are in the microfilms that were released into the public arena. Were names redacted from the files you were looking at that the Len Stringfield had?
No, I got now I did not see the original bank boxes of material. I did not see that. What I did see are the 65 3-ring binders over at Lunken Airport in Cincinnati back in 2013. That I did see. And that is in the process of being scanned. Names, addresses, telephone numbers, contact info will be redacted, and that will be posted on the MUFON Aquarius website.
Well, I think it's only right that they redact the names from the
Correct.
Public posting, because Bill Brazel, who was one of the main witnesses of the Roswell case, was telling me that he would periodically get calls from drunks at 3 o'clock in the morning asking if the information from the Roswell incident was accurate. And he would always say, well, yes, go read the book. That information is accurate. But the point simply is, it's not fair to the people to have that sort of thing going on. Some people just have no, I guess, social skills and don't understand that you don't call somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning to verify the information. In my first communications with Bill Brazel, he was always very cordial. But what I had done was send him a letter because it was very easy to get his address from New Mexico. You could send a letter to New York with the address, but if it was a big sky-rise building, the post office wouldn't deliver it. But if you sent a letter to Bill Brazel in Capitan, New Mexico, it got to him. So, and he called.
Okay, Kevin, question for you. What is your assessment of Frank Kaufman?
He's a untruthful person.
Untruthful person. Okay.
I have another name that I would use in polite company, or impolite company, I suppose I should say. No, I don't believe his story at all. I got caught by Frank Kaufman. We believe the story. We found his picture in the yearbook from 1947, proving he was on the base in 1947. Okay. I was always bothered by the fact he was in civilian clothes when he received a medal. I believe the medal is the World War II Victory Medal, which everybody got who served in World War II. So it was no big deal. I don't know why there was a presentation and there was a photograph of it in the yearbook, but we could confirm him being at the base in 1947 in an administrative position. He gave us a copy of his discharge papers that showed he'd been a master sergeant and he'd had training in intelligence. And he had some other documentation he supplied. When we got to looking at this carefully, this is before I read a book called Stolen Valor. And in that book, it's about all these people claiming to be Vietnam veterans who were not.
Right.
Okay. I'm a Vietnam veteran and I can prove it. And in fact, I actually got challenged in LaGuardia Airport about 3 weeks ago because I was wearing my Vietnam veteran hat and this guy said I looked too young to be a Vietnam veteran. If I'd been smart, I would have said, go get on your cell phone, go to the 187th Assault Helicopter Company website, go to the unit roster and scroll down and you'll find my name and a picture of me. But I think I finally convinced him I was. But the point simply is I read that book and then we started vetting these people very carefully. We learned that Frank Hoffman had not been a master sergeant as he claimed he had been a staff sergeant. He had no training in intelligence. He was an administrative NCO. And then other parts of his story began to collapse. So no, I do not believe Frank Hoffman's story anymore.
Okay. Do you concur with Don Schmidt's estimate that the escape pod that landed at the crash site 35 miles north of Roswell was about a 13-foot long egg-shaped craft with a little bit of a dome on top and a hull breach? Do you concur with that assessment?
I know there was what we call the impact site. I'm not sure it was 35 miles northwest of Roswell. It's not that far off the main highway going into Roswell.
That's correct.
And it's in sort of a valley surrounded by hills, but it's closer. And we have testimony from Bill Rickett about being on that site. And he was there with Sheridan Cavett and Edwin Easley, who was the provost marshal at the time. I think the description of that is kind of confusing because the original description that I read was based on the testimony of a guy who'd seen something in a silver plate B-29 on the base later on, thinking this was the escape pod. But what he was really describing was an MK3 atomic bomb. The clue is the silver plate B-29s. The bomb bay had been modified to carry the atomic weapons. So they had on the base at Roswell, they had the regular B-29s that would carry a conventional load, and then they had the silver plate ones, which were in a different area, and access was restricted to it because at the time the atomic bomb the size and shape was classified. And Tom and Don got a testimony from a guy who'd inadvertently gotten into one of the silver plate B-29s. He was a mechanic and he was in an area he wasn't supposed to be. He thought he could be there. And that's the description that he gave of it. I think that might be something of a misnomer. But I think that Don and Tom are very careful in their research. And that description may be confused by that specific eyewitness testimony.
Okay. And then, Kevin, what are your thoughts on Timothy D. Proctor? Any words on him and what he saw with Mac Brazel?
I may be the only researcher who ever talked to him.
Really? Okay.
Because he was very reticent to talk. This is becoming an interview of me, which I should stop, but I'm not going to because it's only fair. We had learned that he hung around in a convenience store close to somewhere down around Carrizozo, I think it was. I staked out the area for a while, but never saw him. I talked to him on the phone, I think twice. I was calling his mother. He lived with his mother, Loretta Proctor. The first time I talked to him, if I got the sequence right, he just gave the phone to his mother. The second time I talked to him, I got a little bit of information, not a whole lot, just that he had been involved and he'd been frightened by the military. So there's very little information that came directly from D. Proctor, other than what came from Loretta, who later in his life, he died, I think, at age 65 before Loretta had passed, talking about what he had seen. So we have a little bit of information, but it's secondhand. What I got is firsthand, but is not as complete as I'd like it to be. It seemed that he was very disturbed by these events. I guess we could say that. He was very disturbed by something that took place in his life. He became, I think, an alcoholic and that sort of thing. So he was very reticent to talk about this. He didn't want to talk to anybody about this. And as I said, when I talked to him the 2 times, it was by accident because he answered his mother's phone. And I think the stuff is, I think I've reported on that in one of the Roswell books that I have done.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
Anything else? You're on a roll here. Let's get this Len Stringfield. What I was going to ask you, was there a particular case in Len Stringfield's reports that caught your attention that you think is a really important case that may not have been properly researched?
All of them are very interesting, and there's a whole bunch of them. But to answer your question, there is a specific case that really interested me very much. This has to do with a United States Marine who was based at Cherry Point, North Carolina, back in December 1963. Now, this is in Leonard's publication here. So in a nutshell, the story is that December 1963, he has called to board a plane with blacked out windows, and they flew 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina, to a location that he didn't know about. This is an undisclosed location. He was brought to a building. They opened up either the hangar doors or a main door. He looked inside. There was a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft propped up on scaffolding. They built a catwalk around this thing. It was about 15 feet tall. It looked like a fat hamburger. It had 9 elliptically shaped opaque windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. His job was to guard the craft for 2 weeks. He said that there were multiple teams of white lab coat technicians with color-coded badges. So if you had a green badge.
Let me break in here because I'm up against the break again.
Okay, no problem.
Unfortunately, we'll come back with the scaffolding and the windows and the guards. I was going to ask you what his role was. We will be back after this with Michael SCHRATT, so please stick around. And I am back with Michael SCHRATT. Please notice I was paying attention this time. I was not caught off guard. When we went away, you were talking about a Marine witness who was flown from Carolina to an undisclosed location, and he was brought in as one of the guards on the craft. That is correct. Now, so when we left, we were talking about the white-coated guys, obviously scientists, who were brought in to do their research. That's right. So he said that there were lab coat technicians. Each had a color-coded badge, and he proceeded to watch them take a diamond-tip drill bit to the side of the craft. They could not penetrate it. They did the same thing on the opaque window. They could not penetrate it. They brought in acetylene torches. That didn't work. And then they brought in a laser back in 1963, December 1963. They placed the laser, shined it onto the craft itself. It bounced off the exterior and then reflected up and damaged the ceiling tile. And I contacted the gentleman who interviewed this Marine. He's the one who alerted Leonard Stringfield. So that's how Leonard Stringfield got a hold of this. Now, he said that this is the Marine here, directly below the craft on the quote unquote. Michael, your mic is muted. Once again. We're back on. Okay, so there was a white painted circle below the craft, and his job was to shoot to kill anyone who would try to breach that white circle. And then on the last day, near the last day, he went into the facility. There was nobody else there, so he was alone with the craft by himself. Nobody frisked him when he got in. So he brought a small Minox camera. He snapped a shot of this thing. The very last day on the job, he walked in, he saw that the craft was being moved off of its scaffolding,
put onto a tractor trailer lowboy truck with tarps and chains over it, and was being moved to the next location. So in a nutshell, that is his case. I interviewed the gentleman who interviewed the Marine back in 1986. I bet I did about a 2.5-hour videotape with him, and he gave me his original notes. He gave me original sketches from the Marine, and I believe this to be a real case.
What about the photograph?
Photograph was lost in a flood back in 1983.
Always the way.
It's always, that's how it always is. Yep.
I don't know how many times we've spent years, decades looking for any documentation on the Roswell case, and always we're just too late. I had one guy tell me that he had a rancher in the area had taken photographs back in 1947 with he had a strange name. And so Don and I went to the county assessor's office, and I said, can you search the tax records using the first name? They said, yeah. I gave it to them. They came up with 3. 2 of them were businesses. We went to interview the guy, didn't want to lead him in any directions, but the upshot is, no, we didn't get any photographs. So never seemed to be able to find that little piece of evidence that we really need.
That's right.
So you talked to the person who talked to the Marine. You have not.
That is correct. Yeah, he interviewed the Marine back in 1986, and then he said, "I've got someone that you need to talk to," and that's how this Marine talked to Leonard Stringfield, and it's in Leonard's book.
But you have not talked to the Marine.
Nope, I can't. I've been trying to find him for over 10 years. I just don't have the resources to track him down. I know where he lived back in 86. I know his wife's name. I know his state in the Marines, who he was, what his MOD was. I don't have his DD 214, so I don't have that information. But I think we've got enough to probably find that guy, but I just don't have the resources to do it. I don't have the computer CIA network databases to track the guy down.
Do you know what rank he was?
Ranky? No.
No, rank. What grade he?
Ranky. I think I could probably get that for you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was just curious.
Off the top of my head, I don't know what rank he was.
It strikes me odd that they would bring somebody from North Carolina to guard this thing when they might have had resources much closer. And we don't know where he didn't
say. It's not in the report, but this is what he said. He said that he guarded the craft for 2 weeks. It was propped up on scaffolding, and this is very close hulled. They could not get into it with diamond tip drill bits. They could not get into it with acetylene torches. There were lab coat technicians there. They all had color-coded badges. It's a very detailed report. This guy gave me sketches from the Marine, and so I believe it to be a credible case. Although I can't find the guy, I don't even know if he's alive.
Is there another? Because we're running out of time. Is there another case that?
Sure. 1955, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Actually, this is 1953, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is multiple times within the status reports that Leonard talked about. You probably, Kevin, know about this case. So this is a warrant officer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base who stated that a 4-engine DC-7 cargo transport plane landed on the tarmac at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It taxied into one of the hangars. The hangar doors shut closed. And then on the port left aft rear side of the DC-7, there's a cargo entry hatch door that opened up. And then a forklift came over and started offloading these pallets. On one of the pallets, there were 3 wooden crates. All 3 on the top had their tops and lids removed. And he was close enough to look inside. And he said that there were 3 ET bodies about 3.5 feet tall, all wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. He said one of them was female because it had breasts. And then he said that all 3 were being suspended off the bottom of the wooden crates by a white netting to protect them from the dry ice freezer burn below. And so this is what's talked about in the Stringfield notations. I'm sure you have at least 2 references of this case in your files as well.
Yeah, there's many cases, especially in 1953 for some reason. I've always been bothered by the idea that these things were seemingly raining out of the sky. There's so many crashes, reported crashes.
Right.
What do you think are 5 that you believe sincerely are real crash retrievals.
Okay. Well, I believe the Marine case is correct. Although, I can't prove it. I don't have a piece of a glove compartment from a flying saucer, right? Like you talk about. The physical evidence is always the hardest thing in this, because we're not going to move anywhere in this field. Any kind of congressional hearings or any kind of UFO meetings, we're not going to get anywhere unless we get the actual physical hardware. That is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. Anything less than that, we're going to be spinning our wheels. The United States government is going to keep on kicking the can down the road, and we're going to be here another 50 years and still not what's going on here. So we need to get that physical evidence.
But what 5 cases are you really?
Okay, so the 1963 case with the Marine, that's one. The 1953 case with the warrant officer, that's 2. We've got a case in 1952 of an office worker who accidentally went into 2 do not enter double doors. She got into the basement vault at the Pentagon. She saw a pickled alien in a glass jar. That's 3. We've got the case that we talked about here in Arizona. That's in 1947. That's 4. A 5th one could be, there's another case in Arizona where a canine group was sent to an unimproved runway where this gentleman was supposed to guard kind of a temporary, quickly developed hangar facility, and he had to guard that facility. He got very curious one day. This is in Leonard's report. I've got the page number. He pulled open the flap, looked inside this kind of temporary hangar, and he said that he saw white lab coat technicians. He saw multiple tables around the area that had calipers, micrometers. There was like metallurgical testing equipment. Off to the right of the hangar was a walk-in freezer with body bags. And then in the center of it was about an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft with a low-rise dome on top. So those would be the cases, I think, that have some meat on the bones.
But aren't they all basically single witness?
They are single witness, yes.
Unlike Roswell, where there's literally dozens of witnesses.
You're correct. That is correct. That is correct.
So what we're dealing with here is sort of accidental observations.
In some cases, yes. And these are like onesies and twosies. These don't have like a whole lot of witnesses. Now, some do. Some other cases within the Stringfield collection, they do have more witnesses. But the majority of these cases, looking at them, he's dealing with one military witness. Now, there could have been other witnesses, but they never came forward.
We haven't found them. With Roswell,
or we haven't found them, yes.
We had a single witness, and we went from there on that.
Right.
I'm running out of time here.
Okay.
You did a book with UFO illustrations in it?
Correct.
And the name of the book, and how can we get it?
It's called Dark Files, A Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters. It's on Amazon, so if you just type that in with my name, it'll pop right up. And
that's your only UFO book to date?
That's my fully illustrated, full color book on UFOs. Yes.
And those illustrations are impressive. I have to admit that.
Thank you.
Do you have a website or contact information?
I really don't have a website because I'm small fries. This is a crusade for me. So, that's fine. I have a YouTube channel under my name. So just type in my name. My YouTube channel will pop right up. And I try to do at least something once a week. And I'm on Facebook. Mm-hmm.
Do you have contact information you want to share with the audience, or you?
It's all on my Facebook page. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, Michael, thank you so much for taking time. I think we had a good discussion here today.
I think we did. Yep.
And we'll have to do it again, because I certainly enjoyed it if you did. Thank you so much.
And Kevin, I'm still your friend, Kevin. I'm still your friend.
Yeah, I didn't do anything mean. Anyway, that was Michael SCHRATT talking about crash retrievals and Lynn Springfield. And the problem is looking at the information that David Rudiak and I had uncovered in the last couple of weeks. It seemed like he had more inside information than came out about that, especially about the Kingman case. I think we all sort of agree on a lot of this stuff, but that's the way it goes. I will admit, too, I lean toward the extraterrestrial on the Roswell case, and I point that out because people are always asking me, what do you really think? I look at the fact that we have eliminated all the terrestrial explanations, and we don't have a good a good place to go with that. The Air Force helped us out with that, by the way, in their mid-1990s investigation, where they corroborated that there was no good explanation except for this cockamamie Project Mogul explanation, which I think we've thoroughly debunked. Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, and I have debunked. The book would be Roswell in the 21st Century, which gives you a chronology of the events and how it all played out with some detailed information on MJ-12 and the Project Mogul, and why I believe it is not a good explanation since the flight was canceled, given the documentation which the Air Force found for us, and I always appreciated that. The other book is Understanding Roswell, which deals with some of the aspects that really haven't been discussed, like what happened to the people after they were involved in the case, or what was their involvement in the case and what happened to them and that sort of thing. I think there's some interesting stuff that is in there. I've of course, done a book on level land, which I mention all the time, which talks about the not crash retrievals, but the electromagnetic effects, and literally the dozens of witnesses involved in the level land case. I've looked at the Socorro case in depth and found some new information there that I think is important. That book is called Encounter in the Desert. You go to Amazon, take a look at Kevin Randle, and you'll find a list of my UFO books, and you can decide if there's something interesting there. I also write action adventure as Eric Helm. If you type in Eric Helm, you'll find a bunch of books there as well. And if there's something that's interests you, take a look. I'll be back later on with more information about UFOs. So thanks for tuning in.